recorded.
Call the meeting to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions for the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order concerning imposition on strict limitations in the number of people that may gather in one place, meetings in the town of Upton are being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. So with that, we're opening the January 5th, 2021, if you can believe that, Board of Selectmen meeting. We're going to open the meeting with public comments. We're going to go through some minutes, some guest presentations. We've got a few discussion items, and then we'll have a town manager report. So with that, do we have anybody from the public that would like to share anything with us? Go ahead, Ms. Haggerty. How are you?
Through the chair, good evening, everybody. On the William Street Purchase and Sales Agreement, on the first page of the agreement, I'm not sure whether we're buying or selling, because the first page, it looks as if MG Kane Properties is selling, but on the last page, it looks as if we're the town of Upton is the seller, if you look at the last page of the document. So I wasn't sure if we're buying or selling, because it says the town of Upton on the last page is the seller. So I want to call that to your attention.
Wonderful.
Because I was confused. Okay, I hope. Thank you.
Just for other folks on the phone that may not know, Lynn, just introduce yourself, please.
I'm sorry, Lynn Haggerty, Cider Mill Lane.
Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Antonelli, 148 South Street. Good evening, everybody. I have several concerns that I would like to bring to the Board of Selectmen attention. The first has to do with the draft economic plan presentation. Unfortunately, it was not available to be reviewed. So I guess one question would be, are we allowed to ask questions during that presentation or following that presentation since we don't have the documents?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. The second,
go ahead.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the second, I do have some concerns about the economic development plan in total. One concern I have is during the most recent meeting, one of the members of the committee expressed some disparagement around the plan, stating that it would be thrown into a drawer and not paid any attention to anyhow. And I guess, would like to call the Board of Selectmen and the committee's attention to the fact that the plan cost, Derek can clarify this, between $35,000 and $40,000 for this plan. So I would certainly hope that anybody working on the plan and anybody reading the plan and hearing about the plan would accord it the respect and believe that it will have the impact that it should have. I just find that very discouraging that a member would say that. I do have concerns about the Economic Development Committee vision going forward. At the recent appointment of new committee members, one of the committee members specifically stated that he thought the economic development revitalization of downtown should focus on the over 55-year-old with disposable time and income on their hands. And that was reaffirmed in his statements of that meeting. So I don't know if that is since two of the members of the Board of Selectmen voted to appoint that person, if that is indeed their orientation towards the downtown revitalization, if they're thinking that that's where our focus should be. That's certainly not what the downtown vision stated. So that
may I respond to that? May I respond to that right away, just to clear that out of the way?
Well, not right now, Mr. Brooks. Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle. You can finish, please.
Okay, so regarding the shared parking agreement, I do have concerns regarding item number, I believe it's 17. section F, it basically states that although the previous item says we have the right of first refusal should the VFW decide to sell the land, if in fact they surrender their charter or forfeit their charter or lose their charter, there's no recourse. They no longer have control over disposition of the land. So it would be my fervent hope, although perhaps I'm being too optimistic, that 25 years from now that we don't continue to have the need for a VFW, because I would certainly hope that we would naively perhaps move away from a war-keeping or wartime situations, and that we wouldn't necessarily have a huge veterans contingent. That's probably naive, but regardless, I think that a shared parking agreement doesn't make sense. I think the VFW has been more than generous in their concessions along that parking agreement, but it just doesn't make sense to me when we really don't have control of the land going forward. Regarding the funding request to the Neighbor to Neighbor program, I'm reviewing the advertisement that was submitted in the December town crier, and it specifically says to be eligible, an applicant must be an Upton resident and must have limited income or have dire circumstances due to COVID-19. Those are the only parameters. There are no metrics listed, and when I tried to do a search for that information, I was very discouraged because there's somebody who's concerned and is looking for assistance and doesn't know if they would be eligible. And it just seems to be very arbitrary to have dire circumstances listed as a metric or a eligibility qualifier. I certainly hope the program is being more closely overseen by that, and I'm hoping that we could publish information so that it can encourage people that are interested or have need of support of their neighbors to be able to apply for the program. It's concerning to me that we have spent almost $20,000, somewhere in the neighborhood of $19,000, and we've only helped 12 people over the past 10 months. That seems to me a little bit concerning, very concerning. I think that there are more people in need, and I think we should look at that more closely. And lastly, the rapid recovery planning application. The Board of Selectmen have a motion to approve this planning application. It's my understanding, and perhaps Derek can correct me, that this has already been submitted. It had a December 18th due date, and it looks like on the application that it was actually submitted. There's a couple pieces of information that are actually inaccurate in the application, not the least of which our mailing address is not the town of Boylston, it's actually the town of Upton. So I would just caution that the Board of Selectmen might not choose to sign or approve this application at this time. As I said, there's additional pieces of misinformation which I can go into in greater detail if you would like, or if you would like to end my diatribe here, you're more than welcome. And then I guess the last comment I have is about the William Street purchase and sale. It is a purchase, as I understand, it's a conservation purchase. And I would just call to mind that at the most recent town meeting, the residents expressed concerns about continuing to make conservation purchases in light of that we have many properties that we haven't developed properly for full access by all the citizens. So I would see this as yet another purchase without working forward into making improvements in what we have. And I'm particularly concerned knowing that we already have a budget deficit for FY22 of over $200,000, that we're continuing to spend money on land when that's one thing that Upton is really not shy of owning. So thank you for your time, and I relinquish the mic.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It's great to have your engagement and participation. I wished we had more people that paid such close attention to what was going on. So appreciate the perspective. Any other public comments?
Ann O'Brien.
Go ahead, Ann.
Thank you. I just wanted to, it's going to be an echo now. On the Neighbor to Neighbor program, I was greatly disappointed to see that only 12 people have been helped and the sum of money spent. So I would hope that going forward, either more people are helped or there's a looking at the program in total to see what else could be done with those dollars to help people. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, just the one thing, obviously appreciate everybody's feedback. That's why we do these this public comment time at the beginning of the meeting, so that we can get people's input on the items on the agenda and just in general. I do want to reinforce with folks regarding the Upton Neighbor to Neighbor program, because we will be talking about that later. We've been very clear as a board that we should encourage anyone and everyone that thinks they need help or wonders to err on the side of requesting help. The reason we've only helped 12 people is because there are very few people that are willing to ask for help. We've gone to the local church leaders, we've gone to nonprofit leaders, we've done reach out through all of the community organizations in Upton, the Men's Club, the Bloomer Girls, anyone that we can think of. We tried to cast as wide a net as possible. We put the highway signs up to encourage people to seek assistance. So, you know, we as an organization, we as a town, we as a community are nothing but committed to helping as many people as possible. So for those that think they may have identified somebody or know of somebody or even suspect that there might be somebody that could use help, we absolutely want to encourage them to come forward. And the reason the expectations are vague is because we want to make sure that we can help as many people as possible. So again, I would just reinforce, please, please, please send people to seek out that assistance through social services. It's really important, and we're trying to work. It's one of my personal missions to try to make sure that we distribute as much of that welfare trust fund as possible. It's got over $700,000 in it. So we have a tremendous amount of capacity to do a tremendous amount of good for people. And we really need to start to build the distribution platform so that we can get those monies out into the community where Mrs. Ristine wanted them to go. So thank you. With that, we will move on to item 2.0, the approval of meeting minutes. Oh, sorry, hold on one sec. Michelle, did you have your hand up?
I did. Thank you, Brett. So I wasn't aware that the Neighbor to Neighbor Fund was under the Welfare Trust Fund. Can you, maybe not now, but can we have more information about how that fund how that fund works?
Of course, yeah. If we can put it, I mean, we can put it on a future agenda. That's also, the trust is, it's actually part of someone's will and trust, so we can read that as well. It's even more vague. It basically says to help people in need in the town of Upton, and really the Board of Selectmen is administering it. It's private funds. It's not tax money. And what we've been doing, because we've struggled to distribute those monies, we created the Upton Neighbor to Neighbor program inspired by COVID as a way to bring people and find ways to distribute those funds. So what we've been doing is funding the Neighbor to Neighbor program in small tranches, like $10,000 at a time, from the Welfare Trust Fund. And you know, the more we can do of that, the better. But the Neighbor to Neighbor program is funded from the Ristine Welfare Trust Fund that Mrs. Ristine put in place for the town.
So I think I love that you've been doing outreach, and kudos to everybody involved. Because I do, you know, as I was talking, that there are people that I know that are concerned. They are feeling, like you said, they're feeling proud, and they're feeling also concerned that they may not, quote, qualify, and that there are other people in greater need. So I think if they understood that we're sort of on the other side of that, that would be more encouraging to people that really could use some help. So that would be terrific if you could provide a little more information around eligibility and requirements and parameters and how that all looks. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Brett.
Yep. No, of course. And again, people should know, and sometimes this helps too, is like, this isn't government money. This isn't a government handout, right? They're not taking other people's money. This is money that somebody donated, created a trust. It's private money. And I think that sometimes is a hurdle for people too. So again, anything that we can do to encourage people to seek the support. And the other way I've described it to people, and then we can move on, is, right, you have to think of people in need in terms of people in need in Upton, because this is only a trust fund. This is only money that can be used for people that live in Upton. So what need looks like in Upton is very, very different than what need looks like in Worcester or Boston or other urban areas, right? So that's what people have to remember, is that we need to find the neediest people in the town of Upton. And I'm sure that in most cases, they're in a much better place than needy people in other parts of the country and world. And so that's a distinction that we need to make as well for folks, is to say, hey, yeah, you might not feel like you're in need. You might look around at people and say, wow, there's people that are much more needy than I am. But remind them that this is money that can only be used for Upton, and so need is relative to the people in Upton. But okay, thanks for that. Minutes, Maureen or Steve, the December 15th minutes. I'll take feedback or a motion.
I actually did not get a chance to review the minutes. I didn't see it listed on the agenda, and I did not get the email on them. So if we could pass this over till next meeting, if that's okay with my two associates or colleagues.
Of course.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. With that, we'll move on to the guest presentations. First up, we have the Economic Development Plan presentation. I think I'm handing that over to you, Mr. Ross.
Yes, that's correct. Good evening. So here to present to you the Economic Development Plan. Hopefully we don't take a lot of time. We're going to present tonight, walk you through the history and what we came up with. And then we will come back at a future meeting after you have time to digest the full plan. It's over 60 pages for the board to digest it, look at it, come up with feedback. We'll come for approval at a future meeting date. So I realized that the plan isn't posted out there and it wasn't shared. And part of that was because of how large the plan was. I didn't want to just put it out there and have people wading through it without really understanding how it was constructed and what we were trying to get to. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes to do that as a committee, answer any high-level questions you have, and then leave it for everybody, like I said, to kind of dig through it on their own time and get back to it. It's approximately, I think, a 13 megabyte file, 60 pages. So it has to be downloaded from a Dropbox. It can't easily be shared. So it was about 2 years ago, the EDC was formed, and one of the three main tasks that the committee was given was the development of this economic development plan. The town had acquired a grant for, I think it was roughly $35,000 to have CMRPC help assist the committee in the development of this plan. And over the past almost 2 years now, this task has been ongoing. The committee has spent a lot of time and effort with CMRPC working on the first two sections, which is a little bit of the history of the town and the demographics and the makeup of the town. And then the committee on its own has worked really hard, I would say the last 4 or 5 months, on determining kind of what the goals are and the action plan associated with those goals that come at the end of the plan. So I'm going to ask Steve Rackerton from the EDC to kind of walk you guys through more details on the plan, as he's been our point person on this endeavor for the last year plus. Steve?
Okay, Kelly, if I could be able to share the screen. Let's see. is my screen sharing? Okay. Okay. So as Dave said, the plan, as we have shared it with the selectmen, is organized into 3 parts. Part 1 is basically some history of the town, some background information, and essentially the committee wrote most of that part. Part 2 is a lot of detailed economic analysis, a lot of data on demographics, on income, on all kinds of things that are important to understand from an economic development perspective. And most of the information, all of the information in that part was created by the staff at CMRPC. Part 3 is what Dave said, the goals and action plans. So this first section here in part 3 presents information that was collected during the Upton Central Redevelopment Working Session, the visioning session. And these were things that people wrote down about strengths of the town, the weaknesses, opportunities to make the town better, and some threats. So we looked at that, and we looked at coming up with some specific goals. So the first goal, the one that we still have work to do on, is to implement the Upton Center revitalization effort that we started a while ago. And now that we have a town planner that can help us, we're hoping that this process can actually be accomplished this year. So to that end, we're going to try to create some kind of a needs survey for both businesses and residents about specific things that they think they really need for the Upton Center, and we're going to use that information to help develop a new RFP that we can hopefully post to the Central Register and advertise for developers. We also are going to be supporting the continued development of the community center at the Maytown meeting because we believe that that is really a key piece of getting the downtown redeveloped, as well as coordinating with the state on the Route 140 TIP project, which will be coming through the center of town sometime 2021, maybe 2022. So that's the first obvious goal. The second goal that we came up with was to focus some attention on West Upton Center. And what we hope to do, again, working with our town planner now, is to evaluate the existing zoning that applies to West Upton Center and determine if there are any changes that perhaps we should make to that zoning. Come up with some design guidelines like we did for the Upton Center redevelopment project that could apply to West Upton Center, and coordinating again with the state on 2 projects, the part 2 of the TIP project for Hartford Ave and the 140 TIP project. So that's what we identified as our second goal. The third goal that we identified was to help make it easier for businesses to open and locate in town by streamlining some of our licensing and other related procedures. One of the things we're hopefully going to be doing soon is creating an economic development page on the town's website, creating a small business resource guide that would help provide small businesses with the basic information they need to know about signage, about permitting, and other basic things to help them get their project, get their business located here. And maybe even creating a business review board that would meet periodically to assist small businesses in opening their business. The fourth goal that we identified is to, since we are the Economic Development Committee, it would make sense that we are involved in actually encouraging and fostering business growth in town. One of the things we hope to be able to do is compile an inventory of commercial properties that are available for development, maybe do a study of the infrastructure needs throughout the town, try to promote the use of any vacant buildings as business incubators, create and maintain a list of small businesses in town so that we can get information to them quickly and we can get feedback from them. Maybe even help create a small business association of businesses in town, and work with the Blackstone Valley Chamber of Commerce to perhaps host a business roundtable meeting. In addition, we may want to consider having another small business fair like we did about a year ago. So those are some of the things that we're looking at trying to do to help foster the growth of small businesses. And this has come from one of the pieces of data that's in the report that CMRPC presented is essentially this table here. And what this table shows is what they call retail leakage or the retail gap. And basically the numbers in the right-hand column in green basically represent the unmet demand for retail opportunities that exist in town based on the CMRPC's assessment of the demand and the supply. So the bigger the number, that illustrates the bigger the potential demand is for a particular retail service in town. So we're hoping that we can use data like this to help encourage small businesses to locate here, as well as other data that is presented in part 2 on the average household income, the average level of education, and that kind of information that can all be very helpful and interesting for businesses who potentially might look to locate here. The last goal is to leverage our existing resources, cultural and things like public utilities. So, for example, we have a lot of open space in town, and we should come up with ways that we can leverage that, take advantage of it from an economic development perspective by perhaps promoting ecotourism as a thing in Upton, expanding walking tours of the historical sites that are in town. We also are very interested in helping to address what was before the pandemic a significant commuting issue by conducting a survey of commuting patterns, and especially now in the hopefully post-pandemic time, how those patterns are going to be changing and whether it makes sense for the town to become part of a regional transit authority, whether it's the Metro West Regional Transit Authority or the Worcester Regional Transit Authority. And lastly, there certainly are some sites that might be in town that might be suitable for large-scale solar activity and maybe energy battery storage sites as well as data center sites, which have very low impact but can produce significant amounts of tax revenue for the town. So those are the 5 goals that we've identified. So again, there's a tremendous amount of information in this plan, and I'm hoping that the selectmen will take some time to go through this and come up with whatever questions and concerns they might have whenever they are ready.
Yeah, so the main thing that we wanted to get across to the board was, as Steve said, those first 2 sections are the history and the economic data, demographic information. There's nothing really there to change. It's more a lot of factual, almost a data dump. But these 5 goals that we've come up with, this would be the backbone of the economic development vision for the next 3 to 5 years for the town of Upton. And that's where we want the board to take some time to read through those, digest those, and provide feedback if they think those are the right goals, if they should be tweaked, if some part of the action plan should be added in, and information like that. And I think it is the type of thing that, as Steve said, you need to take some time to read through it and think about it and look at the data. But we're willing to answer any questions that you may have up front. And Mr. Chair, before we turn it over to you, I think Mr. Burnett from our committee would like to add something to it.
Please.
Yes. So the major purpose of all of these studies, whether the open space study, that we do every year, the recreation study, is to give us the basic entry key into larger funding rounds. There was a comment made about that these things go into file cabinets and no one looks at them for long periods of time. Unfortunately, that's the truth. That does not in any way diminish the value of them, however, because they are the entry key to larger funding rounds from the state or from federal government. So our ability to identify and unlock sources of funding are dependent on our ability to have a broader vision, to show a commitment to a development model that is in tune with the priorities of state government and of federal government, and oftentimes even of foundations. So when we look at these types of reports, the elements that are critical are the broader vision elements. The vision, not to get bogged down in the minutia, but get enthused about where we can go, to have a grand vision that will allow us to tap into the resources that are made available at periods of time when we go through large cultural and economic shifts, just as we're doing right now. So dreaming big and having the backup in facts to dream big are critical pieces of incorporating a plan that gets used long into the future. We will be updating this on a consistent basis. It's a living document like so many of the documents we produce in town, but we have to understand that the efforts that we go through to incorporate these things into the fundamental bureaucratic elements of the community are critically important to our ability to continue to grow in ways that are consistent with the values of the community. And those values have to be clearly stated, and they have to be, as I said, kind of grand vision values.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the presentation and all of the work. We've said it before. This isn't the first time we've reviewed this, and I think that the best approach from here is a couple of things I would recommend. One, continue. I know that the EDC has worked long and hard on pulling this together, and I know that there is, I think, Dave, and correct me if I'm wrong, did you guys vote on this as it stands, or is that something that you plan to do? Or I'm just trying to gauge a pulse of how representative this is of the entire EDC as a group.
At our last meeting in December, we voted this as our final draft to go to the board for approval. Perfect. So we are unanimously in support of this plan.
Wonderful. That's great. I know it's been a lot of work to get to that point, so that's wonderful. And I think clearly it's something that we will all look at very closely and come with some specific feedback at some point in the future. One thing I would recommend is similar to what we did with the finance department proposal back in the summer is to have some kind of open public comment period. So, you know, if you post this up, because it is a lot to digest, right? If you put this up on the website and say, hey, you know, for 30 days, we're going to take feedback, you know, email the EDC if you have feedback or comments, or, you know, whatever the right approach is for you guys to collect and gather input from folks outside the committee, I think would be extraordinarily valuable. So that if there's anyone out there that wants to share input and perspective, that we can, you know, cast as wide a net as possible and capture that, you know, not as a be all and end all from individuals, certainly not to replace the value of all of what the committee's perspective is, but just to see if there's anything on the edges that are opportunities that we may be interested in. So anything, Steve or Maureen, that you would want to ask the committee?
I just agree with you, Brett, as far as opening it up for public comment, and would like to know what the EDC would be looking for as far as opening it up for the comment. And whether it be a 30-day period or a 60-day period or whatever, because there is a lot to digest here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if I could piggyback off what you're saying, Maureen, yeah, I think there's a lot here. Obviously, a lot of work, a lot of meeting hours went into this. I've been critical in the past of a couple of things of the committee. I really feel like the committee's been really pigeonholed and strictly downtown, just strictly looking at that downtown revitalization. So it's good to see within this presentation that you've spent some time, you've looked at West Upton, you've considered other areas of town, because really that's what's going to unlock. We need business revenue. That's the revenue that we need as far as our tax base. As we all know, we're something like 2.5% townwide, which is obviously a poor number. It leaves a lot to be desired. There's another, I feel, being a small business owner and a selectman, somebody who's in town a lot, I hear from a lot of residents, taxes. Taxes is really within all these paragraphs, all these charts that we've put together. Taxes is the big one, because we as a community are taking thousands of dollars of disposable income out of each household. And I use the thousands of dollars because approximately that's, when you look at some of the metrics against other towns, that's what our tax bills are looking like. So when you have each household that is, again, paying that high tax bill, it takes disposable dollars. And in economics, there's an old term, it's called the money multiplier. So all those dollars multiply as you spend them through town. So again, I feel like that really hurts our appeal to business. It's an expensive town to do business in. And, you know, our residents are paying a very high price to live in this town. So I think really to make this tick and really make this work, you know, we've really got to put our heads together to try to do something about the tax bills that we're sending out to our residents. And then I guess the only other thing, again, not reading through everything here, is, you know, I don't feel going forward, we've got to be very cautious. We've been really on a tear lately, buying property. It's buying property, buying property. You know, I don't want to see the EDC coming forward with more land purchases anytime soon. I mean, that's just my personal feeling. I think the people are really growing weary, and I'm hearing about it at least once a week. So those will just be a few things that I throw out, and look forward to meeting up again in the next 30 to 60 days, and we can, you know, review and really get into detail of all the numbers and all the graphs, and you know, what the plan is moving forward. So thank you all for your time.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that the key will be when we get together is to make sure. I mean, I don't know, Dave. What do you think is the best way, right? Because what I don't want to do is keep going sort of around and around and around, right? Like what you've got here, you guys, the EDC has formally approved. So what's the best way for us to get you the feedback, right? I'm going to read through a 60-page document. I may have some questions or comments. Should I get those to you? I just don't know that a big public forum or a Board of Selectmen meeting is the best way for us to get you individual feedback.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a tricky spot because you could have the same questions that your peers have, and we'd end up answering the same question, 3 times or potentially more. Because I do think your idea of having the public comment period is a great idea, and really give people a chance to be heard and to buy into that. There's a little bit of, I think, fatigue on the committee because we've been working on this for so long, but I don't want that to be a reason, you work so hard and to just give up at the end in doing that last little bit of hard work. So, I mean, if we do an open public comment period, any member of the board could submit commentary during that period to the EDC. And we can bring that back to the board, say, I don't know, I know that when we get into February, it starts getting into budget meetings and something like that. So maybe because of that, if we look at March, it gives us a 60-day comment window or a 45-day comment window, and then 2 weeks for the EDC to look at and incorporate commentary. And we could come back to the board at that time and kind of start off. We could decide either start off with the board's questions, or we could start off with a summary of the comments we got and how we incorporated that into it. But I mean, that could be a route. If it's public commentary, all the members of the board are part of the public, and they could submit individual comments as private citizens.
Right. I'm just trying to help, bring it to closure, and I think that's important. So I don't know, Maureen and Steve, if you guys would be up for, sort of committing to the EDC to get them our feedback, so that when we do meet, they've had the opportunity to get our feedback, incorporate it, integrate it, have a dialogue, rather than waiting 60 days to come back and then we give them feedback. Do you know what I mean?
I would commit to that.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. We certainly want to give that feedback in advance of the second meeting. So again, if we look out 60 days or 90 days, whatever that number looks like, and then we can circle back and see what's an appropriate period of time.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, good. I think that will help just to bring it closer. I see your hand, Michelle. I committed that we would allow you to ask some questions. So we'll, if Maureen and Steve don't have anything else, why don't you go ahead, Michelle? And I would just offer, we don't want to get into too much detail here because there will be that public comment period, but please, I did let you know, so go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Brett. No, actually, I wanted to acknowledge and thank Gene for correcting my misconception about his statement in the last meeting that this would go into the drawer. It certainly sounds, with your explanation, Gene, as if that was not a disparagement, but recognition that it might not have an immediate impact on town planning. So I appreciate the correction. Actually, I just have a comment or a question to a suggestion, and which has to do with Goal 1, Action Point 1.1, doing a resident needs survey. I just want to bring to the attention of the EDC that both the Library Commission is looking at trying to do a needs survey or interest survey in library services, and the Disability Commission is also looking at trying to do a needs survey of the demographics of our people with disabilities and impairments in town. So I don't know if we're talking about one, giant survey, if we get better information that way, or if having 3 discrete surveys will better serve our purposes. But just to sort of put that out there, since you do have it as a 2021 timeframe, and I know for the Disability Commission, at least, that's one of their objectives for this year. So just bringing that to your attention. So thank you, Brett. And thank you, EDC.
Anything else or closing comments, Dave? Mr. Brooks, go ahead.
Well, yeah, before we move on, and while Michelle is here, thank you for her comments earlier. Can we address some of the comments you made before the presentation? I'd certainly have a clarification. And I don't know if any other members of the board also want to address any of her comments. So may I carry on with that clarification?
Yeah. I'll allow it.
Yes, sir.
I'll allow it now, but public comment period isn't for a debate amongst people in other committees. So I don't want to end up going back and forth in a discussion. So you can make your comments, David, and then we'll end it there.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be clear, the comment about the 55+ cohort, the context is important. We were discussing in the age demographic of the town, seniors, and that there seemed to be a tendency to equate seniors' needs with the Council on Aging. And the comment I made was that seniors can be broadly divided into two cohorts. There's no clear division. People whom the Council on Aging serves, and people who live independently, have energy, have money, and have time to donate to the town, and let's not smoosh them together. Let's make sure that the town addresses those two separate sets of needs in separate ways. I don't think at any time I implied that 55+ should be the sole focus of redevelopment, and if I did, I apologize. That wasn't my intention at all. It was just simply to provide some clarity about what the term seniors really means in this context. I think people like me who've recently moved to the town into these 3 55+ developments can be of value and should be considered as a resource.
What wonderful, thank you, sir. Item 3.2, the Community Center Building Committee, shared parking agreement. Mr. Brochu, is this yours?
This is mine, sir.
Love
Good
it.
evening. Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year to everyone. And hopefully this is going to be a great 2021. We all deserve it and we all need it. As you all know, my name is Jim Brochu. I am chair of the Community Center Building Committee. We will be, as you know, we will be presenting the overall schematic plan at a workshop that is posted for Thursday night. But this evening, I would like to focus on the shared parking agreement between the town of Upton and the Upton VFW, which is crucial and vital to the plan. The reason why it is crucial is because when we hopefully build this beautiful building downtown, we will only have approximately 16 parking spaces on town-owned property. So it is very important that we have a great partnership and agreement with the VFW so we could share in their parking lot. We have done, and thanks to Steve Rackenden, who has started the ball rolling on this, we have worked many hours to try to put forward a shared parking agreement that, number one, would receive the approval of the membership of the Upton VFW. We have gone back and forth. I think we're on, I don't quite know what draft number we're on. I don't know if it's draft number 3. I think we're on more drafts, but we put forward last week a draft proposal to the VFW, and I've been working with the commander of the VFW on this. And last night they had a meeting of, I believe it was the 52 members of the VFW, and they all voted to support this agreement. I bring this to you this evening for your comment and hopeful approval, because there is a continued compensation amount that the town would need to provide the VFW. Quickly, if I may, and I'm not going to share the screen, as I sent the shared parking agreement ahead of time, and it is attached to the agenda, so hopefully people have downloaded it or looked at it ahead of time. Is we worked with the VFW to identify shared uses and preferred uses. Again, we want to be respectful to the VFW and the library and the Council on Aging for the men's club dinners, the VFW cruise nights, the carnival, the 5K races, the book sales, and other items that we would need to have a preferred use of both areas on those dates. So we tried to identify those dates in the agreement, and we kept it very, I think, generic with respect to shared uses, and we wanted to, again, truly be respectful to both entities, to all entities on this, both the town and the VFW. And we stressed to the VFW that this would be a constant communication between both entities. If, you know, we need to use their parking lot on a time that's not identified, or they want to use our parking lot on a time that's not identified. The biggest challenge in this project is the carnival is the VFW's largest fundraiser, and they struggle on funding and basically supporting, you know, their facility and their membership. So looking at the plan, looking at the boundaries, we don't believe, talking to the commander, and he in turn spoke to his membership, they don't believe that they'll be able to, again, provide a carnival onto the site. So with that said, we came up with a figure, and it is on page 3 of the document, under item 3, compensation, of an average of what the VFW makes as a profit on the carnival. And we added into the speaker who spoke earlier, I do also hope and agree that we will not need a VFW in the future, but I think we will. And currently that they do own that property, so it is our job to try to, again, create an agreement that would benefit both the VFW and the town of Upton. So with that, going back to compensation, we identified an average of $6,000 annually from years 1 through 10, and then basically a 2% escalator up to 25 years. In conversations that I have had with the commander, we had said, well, the concern is that you could not provide, or you could not support a carnival onto your property. So after we build the community center, hopefully, and you realize that you can support the carnival and you do have a carnival, it is somewhat unfair that here the town is trying to make you whole with respect to your fundraising efforts. So we came up with an agreement that if they do host a carnival on the site or off the site, and if it is below the $6,000 profit, then the town will just basically make up the difference to the $6,000. And subsequently, if the carnival has a profit of over $6,000 in their carnival fundraising efforts, then the town would owe nothing on that year. So that is the purpose of myself and the representing the committee coming to you this evening, is for your support and any questions in this agreement. Other aspects of this agreement is maintenance. We discussed this with the DPW director with respect to snow removal, and we were going to use the VFW grounds as a, for lack of a better word, a snow dump if we need to stockpile snow from both properties, in the winter. So we're going to use the VFW property as a snow dump. And if we provide, certain preventive maintenance to our lot, that we would subsequently do it to the VFW lot also. So I believe the board has the shared parking agreement, and I would welcome questions or comments, and I would look forward to your support, I hope.
Thank you, Mr. Brochu. Appreciate it. Just to clarify for folks, how many parking spaces would be created or shared on the VFW land? So how many parking spaces would they essentially be, for lack of a better word, providing?
It's a total of 85, which would be 16 on town property, and we estimate about 69 on VFW. So it's a total of 85.
Yeah, so the VFW property would be providing us 69 parking spaces.
Correct.
And how much are they charging us for that land?
The lease amount, again, under page 3 of the agreement would be years 1 through 10, would be $6,000. And when I had discussions with the commander and other members of the VFW, we basically asked, on average, what was their profit on the carnival, which is, again, their biggest fundraiser. It was as low as $4,500, and it was as high as about $7,300 to $7,400. So we came up with, you know, a number of $6,000 annually, and we would do that from years, you know, 1 through 10, and then years 11 through 20 would be $8,000 annually, and then years 21 to 25 would be $10,000 annually. And again, understanding that if they did hold the carnival either on their property or on a site off of their property, that the town would, the obligation of the town would be basically to make them whole to the $6,000 amount versus the fundraising amount from the carnival.
But they're not charging us any other?
No.
Anything else?
No. No, that is it.
69 spaces for $6,000 a year.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, we would do.
I know we're not Boston, right? But people pay $150,000 for parking spaces, so that seems like it's okay. Interesting.
And again, we would do the snow removal again when we basically clear our parking lot. We would clear theirs also because we need it. And when we do maintenance, whether it be crack sealing, seal coating, lining, striping, stenciling, you know, on our lot, we would also include their lot with it because, again, it is vital to the community center.
Yeah, that's great. And I assume that the lawyers would figure out the right if, like, they want to sell that property, we have the first right of refusal. But I mean, the VFW is at a state or national organization, so like that's beyond me. But obviously, those are things that we would have to make sure were worked out and clear.
We have worked with the commander on the different aspects if they voluntarily gave up their charter versus they lost their charter, what the consequences would be. And there are aspects of this agreement that still need legal interpretation from insurance. You know, we know that there should be liability insurance and certain insurance carried, especially when, you know, a function occurs, but we don't have the ability to do it. I mean, that needs legal review. So there are sections of this agreement that still states, you know, to be determined under legal review. But the agreement is about, you know, 85 to 90% complete. And like I said, I come to you this evening because there is again, a financial impact continuing to the town.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Good. Maureen, Steve, questions?
Well, are we planning on voting this tonight?
I think the intention is to vote on for lack of a better word, the non-legal aspects of this. But correct me if I'm wrong, right? So we're talking really about, I think the main thing is the compensation, right? Because everything else is sort of, you know, more of a formality, right? I think that's the only thing really that the board needs to be involved with is the fact that it would cost the town money.
Agreed.
Okay, so we would make a motion accepting the insurance and the liability this evening's vote, right?
If I may through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chairman, Madam Selectwoman, that has not been identified yet. the insurance has not been identified yet. Again, it still needs legal review, but it's more tonight is just to accept the compensation that has been identified between both entities.
And the approval, I guess, it's a great point, Maureen, because I think that's part of what's making me uneasy too. I think if we do the approval, let's do a contingent on, legal review and approval or whatever we want to call that, because that's going to be critical. That's the part that I'm, it's above my pay grade, but I think that's going to be a really important part of this. But certainly let's vote on the compensation piece. But Steve, go ahead.
I mean, also there's 6 pages here, and is a couple of paragraphs regarding if the VFW continues or decides to sell or disband or whatever. So there's some more here that I'd like to be able to digest really before feeling comfortable to vote on. I mean, at this particular junction in time, but before we get to that, I guess a couple other comments or even questions. Mr. Brochu, good to see you, and Happy New Year to you as well.
Good to see you.
I guess my question is, and this kind of circles back to a couple of years that we've been working on this project, and I know I've heard the number, but I don't recall it. For a building of this size, ideally, or by state law, what are we supposed to have for parking spots for a building of that size?
Apologies, I cannot answer that. I would need to look at what planning requires with respect to parking on this. So I cannot answer that. And I can answer that on Thursday night. I can have that answer on Thursday night when we present further. So my apologies.
I think actually, sorry for cutting you off, but I know I've heard the number, and I think Matthew might know it. It's a percentage of the square foot of the building. And I think where I'm going with this is ultimately, once again, it just appears to me that this doesn't fit, that we're still short on parking, and everybody sacrificing is the problem that I see with the document really is, if there's a carnival, it's usually pretty well attended. So now we've got a situation where residents with young children, it's no longer going to be an option for those folks. Will baseball or the Little League season be impacted by this? Maybe yes, maybe no. It's hard to say. We'll be sacrificing as well. We won't have as many spots as we really need, and then we're going to be paying money to achieve lesser spots. So there's just an awful lot of sacrifice here, which brings me around full circle, which is it doesn't appear to me that the building really fits what we're trying to do and where we're trying to put it, let alone the other part that we really haven't talked about, which is the playground. I know we don't lose the playground, but it has to be moved backwards. So I don't know if by moving the playground, if we gain a few spots, does the VFW gain a few spots on their side or lose a few spots? I don't know, but I just don't know. It just appears to me that there's an awful lot of sacrifice here, and it's a hard pill for me to swallow when later in the agenda, we're buying another piece of land. And 6 weeks ago, we bought another piece of land. And back in, we had conservation. We just conserved another 45 acres, I think it was. And back in June, it was another 50 acres. And we have conservation restrictions all over town for 70 acres here and 50 acres there. So we have hundreds and hundreds of acres in town, yet we're trying to squeeze 14,000 square foot on a piece of land that can't sustain it. And, what do we do now when there's a cruise night? I mean, I would have a totally different feeling if this were a parking lot that was empty 99% of the time, but I don't think that's the case. I think when summer rolls around, it's full more than it's empty. And then you go full circle and you say, well, what happens if downtown takes off and that does get built and we have retail spaces and whatnot? Again, now it looks to me like we'll be short of parking there as well. So I don't know. We still have to support the town hall. So we know we're a little short on spaces there. So it just seems to me like everything's a sacrifice, and I'm just not sure I like what I see, let alone the fact that we'd be kicking down the road an expense, a recurring expense. It's just going to keep on rolling and rolling. You know, what happens after 25 years? I guess that's another legal question we'd have to figure out, is what happens at that point in time. But I guess to circle back to my first question, what is the legal criteria? What really should we have for parking for a building of that size? I guess if we could get that answered, that would be helpful.
Yep.
And I would guess it'll be good, obviously, to have the answer that the 85 or so spaces was based on what the requirements were. Otherwise, I'm not sure where that number would have emerged from. But those are good questions to have. Go ahead, Matt. Do you have a comment?
I do, thank you. I can address the parking requirements for library buildings. There's no law that requires anything. There is sort of a standard put out by the MBLC, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, which is 1 spot per 400 square feet of the building. So with the building range that we're looking at, we would want 40 to 50 spots for library usage. There's a great room in the building, which accommodates up to 80 people. So if you think you might want one, you know, if you fill that room, do you want 1 car for every person? Do you want 1 car for every 2 people? So somewhere around 50 spots is about what this size building would want for library services.
Thank you. And so so in addition to getting that, because I know that's the library piece, there's also the planning board has requirements, and there may be other requirements. So we'll just want to make sure that we get those answers for Selectman Metellian. With regard to the project itself, you know, we have to recognize a couple of things. One is that revitalizing the downtown has been and continues to be one of the highest priorities that folks in the community have raised, right? We had that working group put together, and I know I keep saying it, but people that are against it keep saying they're against it. So I'll remind folks that there were, you know, over 100 people involved in that working group. Every time that the working group has gone to town meeting with a recommendation or a proposal, an article to make an investment related to revitalizing downtown, it's passed nearly unanimously. I think it's quite clear that the folks in the town are invested in revitalizing the downtown area of Upton. I think that this is a critical part of that overall process and that overall vision. And I think it's a testament to all the work and collaboration and discussions and collaboration that's kind of happened over the past couple of years to bring a lot of this to the place that it is now. I would also remind folks that we have already spent $750,000 that was approved by town meeting, again, overwhelmingly approved by town meeting as a down payment in the design and planning for this site and this proposal. So it's certainly my view that this is clearly supported broadly in the community. I think that this is a great use and a great investment in our downtown revitalization vision. I think that, you know, parking is clearly at a premium downtown. We know that. That's why we just bought the land in the other parcel that we're trying to develop, because we know parking is at a premium. So given that, you know, I think it makes a whole lot of sense for us to recognize that we're going to have to partner. There's not going to be any perfect location. There's not going to be any perfect piece of land. You know, people have been looking for a property to use for, you know, decades, as far as I'm aware. It's been 10, 15, 20, 30 years people have been looking at a library location. So it's always extraordinarily difficult to find places to do these kinds of projects. And we've got a perfect spot in terms of a central location for a project like this. And if we can partner with the VFW, who's always been a great partner, to get some parking spaces that's required for a facility like this, then I think that's a very short row to hoe for the benefit that we're getting. Go ahead, Mr. Brochu.
If I could just elaborate on some of the comments. Again, I'm unclear exactly what the sacrifice would be. And again, I think, and again, I'm not going into this project, but I think, you know, we are building on a piece of land that the town already owns. Again, I've been working many hours with the VFW, and they're not truly sacrificing anything. There's a challenge with respect to the carnival. They also understand, and we've had discussions about this, that this is town-owned property. We don't know if, again, hopefully not, but if the community center project fails, what else is going to happen with that piece of property? And something could happen to that piece of property. We don't know what's going to happen to it, that the VFW may not benefit, you know, from it. So again, the VFW is very, I think, very happy with this agreement. They're not sacrificing it. I know, you know, Steve brought up, you know, the car show that both he and I both attend. And that is still going to occur. That is on the agreement. You know, items from the 5K race to the car show, to the yard sale, to the flea market, all that is still going to occur. So the only item in question, again, is the carnival, and which we're working with the VFW to try to make sure that they don't have any hardship with respect to this project, because we want to be good partners, we want to be good neighbors, and I don't see any sacrifice with respect to this. Again, I think this is a very small amount for what we're gaining. They're pleased with it, and I think in the overall aspect of what, you know, the end result of this project is going to produce, I think this is short money, and I think this is a worthwhile partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen, did you have any other feedback or comments? Again, I think that the objective today would simply be around the compensation piece, because I think that that's the main hurdle that needs to be crossed in order to reassure the VFW that we're on the right path.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, again, if you could, you know, just make it a contingent upon further legal review of the agreement. You know.
And also, I think we have to look into, you know, how many, like Steve said, how many parking spaces are required for the building, because you not only have the library, you have the senior center. What if you have two events going on, and they have an event going on in the VFW? I would like to have some questions answered here as to the parking arrangement, the parking requirement. I think that it comes under planning, and not only just the library, but it comes under the planning board also. If we could get that question answered Thursday night, that'd be great.
Okay, are there any other questions, Maureen or Steve, specific questions that we can have Mr. Brochu get answers to prior to Thursday?
Yeah, I think just maybe a little bit better idea of, you know, it'd be nice to really try to look at these events. Most of them are spelled out, make sure we haven't missed any, see what that overlap is going to look like, because, you know, as Maureen just mentioned, you know that there will be issues when there's two events coinciding. I think that's something that we definitely want to look at. And again, I don't know, is there any particular reason why that we would be rushing to approve this tonight? Is there any reason why we can't approve it at our next board meeting? Or what are the thoughts as far as the timeline?
Through you, Chair, I understood you to say that we were only voting on the compensation piece tonight.
I'll defer to Mr. Brochu. Go ahead. You want to answer that question?
The way I look at this is that if we don't have a shared parking agreement, then we don't have a project. That's simple. That's the way I'm looking at this. So again, this is why I wanted to meet with the board this evening before I made the full presentation, before we made the full presentation on Thursday at the workshop, because again, this shared parking agreement is vital to the project.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly in support of what is here. I'm certainly in support of, any arrangement that is both beneficial to the VFW and that they're comfortable with, and that provides the parking required for the building that we are proposing to put in that location. And I trust that the number of spaces that are outlined in this agreement is sufficient for all of the uses. I also assume that the compensation is satisfactory to the VFW. So I'm supportive of this agreement and would be happy to approve it tonight pending legal review.
So I understand, I see the compensation, it's a 2% escalator, but it actually only kicks in every 10 years, it looks like. Was there any discussion what happens after year 25? Is there any discussion if, I think there's is there a section of the contract here that speaks to if someone wanted to break the contract? Any penalties for breaking it? Or I saw something about mutually agreement of the parties. And I guess my only other question would be, how would we fund it? Would we put that under, Board of Selectmen operational expense? Would we put that under, half of that fee being the library and half of that fee being operational to the Senior Council of Aging? Or, how would what would be the best way to handle that? Or is there a better way to handle that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of options. So Derek, do you want to maybe talk about the options for how we would pay for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think how we pay for it doesn't change. Ultimately, it's going to have to be inserted somewhere in the operating budget and would go to town meeting for final approval. So much like we have a line item each year for $2,000 for Memorial Day activities, this would, I think, would follow a similar fashion that we would have to create a line item and we could decide which budget to put it in, but ultimately it's going to impact the bottom line. We would have a line item that would provide up to $6,000 to the VFW.
And then
maybe one way to offset the $6,000, and I'd have to work with the state on this, is they may allow us to use the COA formula grant to fund, say, 50% of this cost. That's something that we can certainly pursue.
Mm-hmm. And then, clearly the town would be dependent on these parking spaces. So ensuring that we have the ability to maintain usage of them through whatever types of transactions or disputes, legal or otherwise, that may occur is critical. So I'm guessing, Jim, that would be part of whatever the agreement ends up being, working with the lawyers to make sure that the town's protected in those spaces because they're clearly essential and required.
Absolutely. And again, there is a section within the agreement that says for a minimum of 25 years with the option to extend said agreement for another 10 years or more as mutually agreed upon by both entities of this agreement. So again, we want to try to be specific, for 25 years, but, cover ourselves moving forward. So, it is, in the agreement that we intend to, or hopefully the town intends to extend the agreement after 25 years, as mutually agreed upon by both. Under the termination clause, again, that is to be, we identified that as to be identified with respect to the legal review of this. Again, in the agreement that I sent out last week to be, attached to this agenda, there are sections in this that says, TBD-lawyers. So again, this is not a complete document, but more importantly, I wanted, and the committee wanted, hopeful that the Board of Selectmen would support the document as it is written tonight, and especially with the, the compensation amount. And again, I think it's short money for what we will be getting.
Yeah, I agree. And Maureen and Steve, I know that you both have the question about the number of spaces. Is the concern that the 85 spaces are somehow insufficient?
My concern isn't that. It's just that there, like he said, there's a couple of areas on the agreement that have to be determined by the attorneys, which is the liability and the insurance. I mean, it's certainly a sufficient number of parking spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's a little bit more here to look at. As you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, yes, the community did support this in big numbers. We did appropriate $700,000, but I feel like the prevailing ideology at that point in time was that the building is on our land. And I think there's a big distinction between, again, moving to a bigger parcel, which was the municipal parking lot, the expectation that the building fits with sufficient parking. Now we're finding there's a lot more to it, so I think that's something that, we've got to kind of wrap our heads around. And as Maureen said, it's a legal document. It's a legal entity. It's our name on it, and we're putting it forward to the taxpayer. So I think that I don't see what the rush is. I mean, unless there's something critical that's happening Wednesday of this week, I don't see what the rush is that it needs to be approved tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a clause in the agreement, Brett or Steve, that if they decided to sell the property, that the town would have first right of refusal? There is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it is in here. I did read it earlier. I mean,
it's in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might be under supplemental covenants.
No, maybe.
Jim, I think you're hearing that there's, some hesitation because of the gaps in the legal details. I'm comfortable deferring that to the lawyers, but obviously not everybody is, or so. I guess we could do one of two things depending on what Maureen and Steve feel is the best path forward. One is we could give you, an informal nod to say, what, the $6,000 or the compensation isn't the hang up. The hesitation is simply around the legal details, and we want to see more of that before we formally approve the agreement, the shared parking agreement. That's one option. The other option is to formally approve the compensation. So the shared parking agreement section C, which would be the other option, and then overall approval contingent on the addition of the legal and insurance details. And the third option would be to not do any of those things. So Steve, Maureen, I don't know what your thoughts are.
I would vote the second option.
So approve just section C.
Yeah. And the overall to be determined on the legal requirement.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And I think what we would say is, we're going to make a motion to approve the section C of the shared parking agreement. All other sections will be reviewed and approved on, or voted on at a later date, something like that.
Right.
You're stating section C. Are you talking about section 3?
Yep. Yeah, section 3. Yeah, sorry, I was using the alphabet. Section 3. Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would at least allow the building committee to have a sense of confidence going into Thursday that they're going to have all the pieces in place. I think we're all confident that we can work out the legalese and the insurance details in protecting the town. So I think if we approve that section 3 tonight, that would at least give the building committee what they needed to proceed in good faith with the VFW.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that's fair. I mean, again, there is, a lot of open-ended items on this agreement. So it is all contingent upon the completion of the agreement, but it's more importantly the compensation. We didn't want to push, put the project forward and then all of a sudden basically have the Board of Selectmen say that we're not going to be supportive of this agreement. With respect to compensation. So I think that is fair, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I would like to make the motion. And I move that we accept Section 3 compensation of the shared parking agreement and the balance of the agreement to be approved upon the legal language that comes from the insurance and the liability. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
I am an A on section 3. Stephen Metellian, nay.
Brett Simus, aye. Motion passes majority action.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome. Thanks for all the work. Next item is renewing annual licensing, the Class 2 for NAILA equipment.
I would need to recuse myself for this particular article. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would move that we approve of Class 2 license for NALA equipment. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Majority action. Steve, if you're within hollering distance, come on back. We're looking at the donation to the Council on Aging.
Didn't even have time for a glass of water. I'm back. Okay. Looks like there's 4 separate donations that have been made on behalf of the Council of Aging and the food pantry. Shall I motion it? Maureen, did you have any comment or question, or shall I motion this?
No, just to thank them very much for their generous donations.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Agree to that.
Let's call them out by name, just to be clear.
Yes, I can make that motion. I would make a motion that we accept these following donations on behalf of the Council of Aging and the food pantry. It would be a $150 cash unanimous donation. A donation for $250 for Craig and Kimberly Bernero. A donation for $260 by Mission, Sergius, and Bacchus. Again, that's for the food pantry. And also a donation for $500 for the food pantry on behalf of WW Contracting Corp. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Show that as unanimous action. Next up, we have the funding requests for Neighbor to Neighbor. I think Janice is here.
Yes, I am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Why don't you run us through the request and how you guys have been doing?
Sure. Well, first, just if I could about the food pantry. So I'd like to also thank all of these folks that have been generously donating. I have my report here that lists that. I'm sorry, I have to turn the page. We have had a total of $4,470 that have been earmarked specifically for the food pantry, and 133 donations that people have brought in, gift cards and items for the food pantry. And just so that folks know that this is going for very good use, we have over 55 people using it. We've had a total to date of 239 visits from people in the community using the food pantry. So just a big thank you to folks out there for that. The Neighbor to Neighbor program has really become my personal and professional mission since I was given this task back when all of this started. It means the world to me to have the Board of Selectmen and the town manager supporting this effort, that I can go out into the community and say, I can help you, and I have the resources to do that. The numbers really don't reflect what we do. There might have been 12 people that we've helped, but as I just read off to you, the number of people that are using the food pantry, that I'm assisting with fuel assistance, that I'm assisting with food stamps, with various other things. The 12 might have gotten a financial piece of that, but there's numerous other folks that we are helping doing a variety of other things. We have been brainstorming, Derek and I and everybody in the community, how to get the word out there. Believe me, if I could get the folks to come in, I would come and grab them by the hand and bring them in. We put into the town crier on December 18th a flyer. So if you saw on the flyer, one side of it talked about social services and the other side was for specifically for the Neighbor to Neighbor program. Since that went out, I got 3 phone calls. That's it so far. And one of the people I'm already working with. We also have plans, I believe it's the town census that's going out, that there's also going to be another insert put into that. If the community groups were meeting, I would be out there shouting it from the rooftop, but unfortunately, they're not. We've got it plastered on the town crier. She's done, they've done a couple of articles about us. You know, when this whole thing started, we met with the community to let them know representation from the community. So it's out there, but to the point being that people say to me, well, somebody else must need it more. When I give a gift card, it's amazing how many say to me, somebody else must need this more. And I am able to say, do you realize how much this town supports you and wants to help you and wants you to be healthy and you know, working towards a plan to be whole? I mean, that's the important thing. We've helped with funerals. We've helped buy car seats. We've helped do a whole lot of things. So, I mean, we look at the number and say, oh my goodness, it's now over 21,000. But yeah, and actually, honestly, I love coming before you and requesting the 10,000 increments to be able to update you. And I hope you can hear in my voice my enthusiasm for this program and my wish that we can get out there. Part of one of my goals this year is to get out there, let people know of the Neighbor to Neighbor, let them know of the other trust fund, which is really the same thing, but for social services. You know, we have helped many people in the past. When there's a crisis, we reach out to families. When there's a fire, when there's a tornado, when there's different things going on in the community, I reach out to them and offer help and assistance. So I come before you again asking for another 10,000, and I know I'll be back again and asking for more because this isn't going away. If anybody knows unemployment, folks didn't get paid for this past week. So, and that's still up in the air. People are in crisis, and I really hope that they reach out to me because I've got numerous resources available to me. So I don't know. Like, I could go on and on, but I won't. Do you have any questions for me?
No, it's wonderful, all the work you're doing. I know you are all working tirelessly to help get people into this program and help people both through the food pantry, both through the neighbor to neighbor, but also just all of the phone calls of people needing support and companionship and just an ear to talk to. So thanks for all you do. I think this is great, and I only wish we could do more. I know you do too. It's hard to get the word out. It's hard to get people to recognize their own need, but we're going to keep trying. So thank you for that. Maureen or Steve, questions, or I'll take a motion.
I just want to thank Janice for all the hard work she does also. And I'd like to make the motion that we approve the request for $10,000 to come from the Ristine Trust Fund. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Would second the motion, Stephen Mattelli and I did want to make a small comment, so I can wait until after you make it unanimous, Brett, and then I can speak to it.
Okay, thank you. So Brett Simus, unanimous action. Go ahead, Steve.
Yep, Janice, as you were finishing what you were saying, I was thinking as you were saying it, it's very nice to hear your enthusiasm in your voice. And, you know, really my only regret really is as a board, I feel like with COVID, everything has slowed way down. I don't feel like although our meetings are long, I don't feel like we have quite as much on our plate as we did, so say a year ago. And I wish there was more we could do as a board, maybe meet more often and help more residents. And it's always a two-edged sword. We say we have these resources, we want to help people, but at the same time, it's also nice to know that there's not thousands of people that out there that need help. So it's always tough to get a read on that. You know, again, you look at it and you say, well, there's only 12 people, but I know that there's, I'm sure 40 or 50 others that have gotten, you know, gift cards or some sort of other help along the way. So again, great job and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next is we want to look at the rapid recovery planning application. Derek, do you want to just give us a quick overview of this document?
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to intro this to Paul Delaquila. He's our new town planner. I don't think we've had an opportunity to formally recognize him because you know, we've been working in this COVID environment, and so this is Paul's first opportunity to support the town through a grant application. And as we reported in the past, Paul works 50% of his time for the town of Boylston and 50% of his time for the town of Upton. And when Paul saw this grant opportunity, he thought this would be prime for the town, given some of the conversations he has overheard at the EDC. So as far as the details of the grant, I'm going to turn that over to Paul so he can explain it to the group.
Right. Thanks so much, Derek, and thanks to the board for allowing me a brief time tonight. I know it's a packed agenda. Indeed, I think Derek set it up very well. This is an unusual opportunity. Obviously, it's COVID related. This is through the Mass Downtown Institute, which has it's an institute initiative. They have an annual round of technical assistance grants they do usually in the spring. This is outside of that traditional scope. So we really only had a couple of weeks. We had 3 weeks exactly to pull something together with this. And basically, the state really came to us, you know, all the towns in the state, and said, look, we really want to support you in your efforts to help with recovery. We don't have a lot of guidance right now. What we want to do is set up a program where you apply, you outline your basic needs. It's obviously not very detailed. I'm sure you saw the attached application. But based on the particular needs of the community, the state will match us up with a consultant group to help us come up with a roadmap with what actions we could take in the short term and sort of in the medium and long term of using, you know, given the situation created by COVID, what can we be doing as a town to support some of these businesses, both now and going forward? And so this was, again, a unique one in that we only had a brief time to respond. Otherwise, I would have probably spoken both to the EDC and this board before going further with it. The state apologized, so it wasn't recognized that they were asking for a deadline of submission right before the Christmas holiday, when a lot of boards in the towns weren't meeting. So they said, submit what you can. You'll be speaking with your boards over the next couple of weeks, and then you could, quote unquote, have the chief officer sign off on it at that time. And so I didn't want to miss the opportunity. So that's why I went forward with it. And again, full disclosure, I'm embarrassed about the town of Boylston making its way into this cover sheet here, but it's a minor matter, and I apologize. I won't make any excuses, but it was an online form, and it was a bit of a challenge to enter all the data, but that'll be pretty tight going forward. But that aside, we were told by MDI that basically for the communities that put in an application, they would get some kind of service in return, and there would be no cash match required, no hours match, no other kind of obligation for that other than to work with the consultants as they come in. And the timetable for that, presumably, as they described, would be mid to late January. And once the initial consultant team was in place, that would initiate a round of public workshops and public meetings. No doubt we'd come before this board again to talk about it as well. To be honest, it's a pretty loose application. I tried to keep it fairly open-ended so that we could begin to address, or hopefully begin to address, some of the issues. I know that the board will be reviewing the economic development strategy that was discussed earlier. And a lot of what I embedded into this application would begin to move us in those directions, especially taking things in the town centers to the next level, especially with the RFP, and also beginning to look at West Upton as a component of our economic development. And it's also, basically it's one of the, obviously it's a prime gateway going east and west into town and out of town. So I tried to keep it open-ended. Again, I feel like it's a good opportunity, and it's a pretty light lift on our part as far as not having to come up with the matching funds or obligating ourselves too much going forward. I've worked with MDI before in previous jobs, and they're a great group to work with, and they're very focused on helping smaller communities increase their capacity to implement their visions. And so I would hope that, with the boards, I'm happy to answer any questions, but hopefully we could garner the board's support and move forward with this, and hopefully sometime later in January, beginning of February, have some news for the board.
Great, thank you very much. First and foremost, welcome, Paul. I know we've talked a little bit on previous meetings, but we're very glad to have you as part of the team, so thank you.
Thank you.
And this looks, great to me. I think that any opportunity to engage with the state to get a sense of their ability to support local development, local business development in particular, is a good way to focus our energy. So I'm certainly a fan of partnering with and engaging anybody that's coming from the state that may bring with them funding to support the town of Upton in our development. So that's great. Thank you for this. I support it. No questions here.
Just want to thank you, Paul, for all your efforts in putting this all together, and hopefully we can gather some support from the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully the first of many. Thank you.
And hello, Paul. And I guess the only question is, this is just strictly consulting services? Is that what we'd be receiving? And then you said you expect that to begin at what date and about? Do they quantify that? Do they say it's so many hours, or how do they award this?
They haven't. I think they're basing it on, I think they have a pool of money that they had from various sources that was unused, whatever, somehow, some way. And so they combined a bunch of sources, both that were, I think, CARES related funds and some other traditional state grant funds. And so I think based upon the number of applicants, which I assume will be many of the communities in the state, they're going to basically do a relatively equal allocation based upon the size of the community. There was 3 different tiers of communities, larger communities, communities 7 to 25,000, which we fall into, and then much smaller communities. And so based within that, it's supposed to be a fairly equitable distribution. I can tell you that the traditional grants they do on an annual basis are also for consulting services, and usually for might result in a product like design guidelines or something like that. That's about a $15,000 project, even though it's a consulting service kind of thing. That gives you a sense of the ballpark where we're talking about here. This will really give us more of a blueprint and some action items going forward, many of which are already sort of addressed with the economic development strategy and some of the other plans we already have. But as was alluded to earlier, you have to set these things so you can put yourself in position for future grants.
Okay, very good.
I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the rapid recovery planning application. No, there's no money on it, so I guess it would be just approve the rapid recovery planning application as presented.
Second motion, Stephen Mattelli and I.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. That's unanimous action. Thank you. Thank you again, Paul.
Great, thank you. And just a quick, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'll be forwarding the appropriate paperwork to Derek tomorrow for his, so he can sign it and do what he needs to do.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Next up, we have the motion to execute the Williams Street purchase and sale. This is a $6,000 little strip of land along Lake Wildwood between the train tracks and Lake Wildwood that the Conservation Commission is asking to purchase as a way of gaining access to other hikeable land up behind Lake Wildwood. And I think it's got several hundred feet of shoreline for people to use to access the lake. There were some questions about the access, but I think everything is in here. I don't know, I'm looking, is anybody here from Conservation that wants to speak to this?
I am here.
Great. Oh, thank you, Christine. Yeah.
Sure. Hi there. This is Chris Scott, and I wanted to just mention that the funding for this is from conservation funds that we've already had in the past, so it's not costing the town more money at all. And I believe Bill is here too, and Mike.
Yeah, Bill's here as well.
Great.
I did hear that there was some question about the frontage. There is a compiled plan that shows 8.2 feet of frontage on William Street. We did add a condition to the purchase and sale agreement that we would confirm there's at least 4 feet of frontage on William Street. And so we'll have a survey done to confirm that. It'd be a fairly limited survey, and it'll be paid for by the Conservation Commission out of their conservation fund. There's a stone bound on the plan on the shore of Lake Wildwood, which could be used to identify one side of the frontage, and then the other side of the frontage will be the edge of the railroads right away, and that's public information.
Great. Yeah, and we've got a picture of the parcel here as well, which is helpful. So thanks for pulling that up. Great. Maureen, Steve, questions?
None from me.
Bill, I think you had mentioned last time, you said there's either 8 feet of frontage on William Street or 4 feet, but did you say that you can walk the property to get out to the lake, or you cannot walk the property to get out to the lake?
You can. Yeah. Again, we're going to confirm that there's frontage on William Street. We do have a plan that shows there's 8 feet. We want to make sure there's at least 4 feet. The property itself has, I think, roughly 1,200 feet of frontage on Lake Wildwood.
Okay. And you said that there is, Christine had mentioned that there's funding available through the through conservation. Okay.
That's correct. So it's funding that's been accumulated over the years, so it will not cost the town any additional funds.
Okay. Just for a point of reference, how much is in that fund right now?
I believe it's about $22,000.
Okay. Very good. I have no other questions, Chairman.
I'll take a motion, or?
I'll move that we accept the purchase of land on William Street and note that where Lynn Haggerty had brought up the last page, it does show the town as the seller and the buyer is MG Kane. We just switched that around.
Yeah, and the attorneys are well aware of that. They pick up.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simon's side, unanimous action. Thank you. Next up, we have Derek and I were talking and thought it would be good as we start the new year to take a look at the priorities that we had put together, Steve and Maureen, back in July when we met, just as a point of review. So, Derek, do you mind just sort of walking us through this, and then, Steve and Maureen, if there's anything that jumps out at you in here that we want to accelerate, or if there's anything new that isn't here that you think we should add, to focus on for the first, couple quarters of this year, then let's definitely do that. So anything we want to accelerate or anything that's missing is primarily what we're after. But Derek, do you want to just walk us through this quick?
Sure. So you can see right here, this is the document that we created now 6 months ago. So this is a good midterm review of the priorities that was set back in July. So I'll just walk you through the current status of each one of these identified priorities. So as you can start from the top here, the financial reserve policy was already approved. That was the first thing that was conducted back in July. The grant review and approval policy we are actively working on that. Today was a good example. The goal is to try to get every grant application in front of the Board of Selectmen prior to its submission. Now, just so we're clear, there's going to be times, and Paul indicated that we'll have to have a quick turnover, so it'll be difficult to always maintain that. But we really want to have a goal of getting at least 90% of the grants in front of the Board of Selectmen prior to them being submitted to the state. So in the next few months, you should see a draft policy to meet those goals. The senior tax relief policy, we really haven't done much with that. There was a small conversation with the Board of Assessors on this, but really hasn't moved much further beyond that. As you all know, at the last meeting, we finalized the town hall use policy. We haven't had any real discussion on the solar clear cutting bylaw. This again was identified as a potential development concern. This is something that at some point in the future we can work with our town planner, the ZBA, and with the planning board to try to look at best practices around clear cutting our developments as it relates to whether it be solar or even a residential development. But again, there hasn't been any clear direction on this one as of yet, or any progress. Engaging and meeting with the railroad is a weekly occurrence. I've reported on many occasions the railroad expansion, and our fire department, code enforcement department, DPW, and other officials from the code department, like wiring and plumbing, that are actively engaged on their railroad expansion, which does include the sewer main project. I can say, though, relative to the landfill closure, that's something that the railroad themselves has put on the back burner because of what they're doing with the expansion of their footprint. I do think this is going to be, once they complete their expansion, they're going to want to try to engage the Board of Selectmen around the final closure and what the costs associated with the final closure will look like. So there'll be more to come on that one. We did talk about having a strategic planning session with all boards. That hasn't come to fruition as of yet. I do think this COVID environment has really hampered all of the board and committee members getting together to have these types of conversations that are probably better suited in person. So again, more to come on that. Governor's Landing. So Governor's Landing presented to the Board of Selectmen about what their attorney did anyways, early in December. Most recent conversations is that they will be presenting in front of the planning board the conversation that they had with the Board of Selectmen and the DPW regarding the infrastructure. So I would say we're probably 25% of the way through that one. We're going to have to, I think, be active participants in future planning board meetings just so we can gain a better sense of the direction that the development itself is headed towards. So most recent conversations said that they were going to try to plan for something in late January to early February to get on a planning board agenda. The downtown redevelopment continues to take shape with the acquisition of 0 Grove Street, 6 Main Street. The EDC again presented their economic development plan today. So again, there's a lot of activity that's happening in the downtown area as it relates to economic development. The RFP committee was, again, another item that was a priority. So as you all know, that the RFP committee itself was disbanded, which led the way to an expanded economic development committee, which we have now 7 members versus the previous 5 members. This is a good segue to talk about the Knowlton Racine distribution program. Again, so I would say at this point, the neighbor-to-neighbor program is kind of the stopgap to a much larger, hopefully much more robust future program that we build for people in need. I would say that the first thing that we have to do to really develop such a program is do some type of needs assessment in the community before we can start to determine what the appropriate services that need to be developed to meet that. But as Janice reported today, the neighbor-to-neighbor program continues to fill that support mechanism. And I have to say that Janice has really done an amazing job. And I know some folks thought 12 people weren't enough, but I look at it as we helped 12 families in 8 months. And so that's 12 families that otherwise would not have been helped, and especially during this pandemic. So whether it's 5 people or 50 people, you know, we continue to do the best that we can to try to reach out to those people in need. And so, you know, whether it's $50 or $500, I don't think the dollar amount should matter either, that we spend close to $20,000 on 12 families, because I think it's really trying to identify what those folks need and fill that void so that they can get through these difficult times. So again, not a lot of headway on this specific program, but End2End has provided an interim solution. The update on the master plan. So not any movement on this right now. Again, the town planner just started 2 months ago. At some point, I would like to believe probably later this year, maybe the summertime period would be a good time period to start to have conversations with the other boards and committees about updating that master plan. I believe Boylston is going through a master planning process right now, so it may be good to let them go through the process and then take a lot of the lessons learned out of their process and apply those in Upton. So, you know, maybe kind of slow is fast in this sense, that we're not jumping on this right away. The chairman to the building committee presented today, and on Thursday you will hear the current status of the community center before it moves on to the next phase of design. So again, we're moving swimmingly on that one as well. Preservation of Holy Angels, again, hasn't come up because that'll come up when we start to engage the EDC around a revised RFP for the downtown redevelopment project. So not much headway there. FY22 budget planning process. So as you all know, Kenny did a great job presenting the FY22 projected revenues and projected expenses. That's the first time that type of session has taken place prior to the budget being developed. So again, that's a first for the town, and we'll continue to do that. And you can see whether it's schools, these are all considerations for the budget, how we build a budget around supporting schools and and other budgetary items we have to consider. So the DPW feasibility committee came forward and presented their initial findings to the Board of Selectmen. Nothing new has transpired from that. I think at this point the feasibility committee will need some direction as to what the Board of Selectmen would like to see them do as far as next steps. So they have conceptual ideas of what that building will look like, but there's a cost obviously associated with that, and given the community center is kind of front and center right now, I think the DPW building has taken a back seat until we see what happens to the community center. As Dennis reported, the DPW's tie-in bond study is complete. That presentation was made mid-fall to the Board of Selectmen, which outlines our infrastructure needs both in water and wastewater. So that, again, is 75% complete, only because you got to figure out the 25% will really come down to funding and prioritizing which one of these infrastructure upgrades we go after first. Streets and sidewalks. So road management plan will be updated. Dennis and I have talked that we'll update the road management plan after we get through the TIP project. But at that point, we'll have a better sense of what our road rating will be after we complete all those road upgrades. Town planner was hired in November, so that's complete. Again, commercial development, we heard a lot about that today with the EDC. So that's moving in a positive direction. Again, that's no real development this year. Again, I think, this, as you might imagine, there's not a lot of investment in commercial space given everything's going on with COVID. So as far as succession planning, I can speak directly to the work that Sandy's doing over the Human Resources Office. That's 50% complete. Sandy's already started to work with the various departments to do an analysis of our personnel and their short and long-term futures with the town, both in the sense of retirements or potential career movements down the road. So we would expect in the next 2 months to come to the Board of Selectmen and provide an update, so we all can get a better sense of how we start to, like we do capital planning, we need to do human resource planning as well, because we do know that there's going to be replacements that are going to be needed in both the short term and the long term. The online calendar is something that Kelly has been working with as well, so that we can have more of a real-time board and committee updates and have the associated committee work with that calendar. So again, I would expect that to be completed by the end of this fiscal year as well. The capital improvement plan. So I reported at the last meeting that we're going to be kicking off in January a capital improvement plan just for our buildings. So to go do a needs analysis of all of our buildings and all of the associated equipment within those buildings, and put that on a timeline as to when those need to be replaced. Our rolling stock, we've already completed that capital improvement plan as well. So I would say that our capital improvement plan is probably misrepresented here, but I would say it's probably closer to 50% done, and will be 100% done once we finish the buildings analysis again. So we've done rolling stock, we've done our infrastructure with the tie and bond analysis, and so now I would say buildings would be the last piece to our capital improvement plan. Charter Commission was just put in there as a kind of a placeholder, given a lot of the potential personnel changes, both this past year with the Treasurer Collector's Office and with the Board of Assessors Office. So just as an update, the special legislation was approved about a week ago by Governor Baker. So the legislation to allow the town to appoint a treasurer collector has been passed, and the special legislation to provide for the staff at the assessing office to be appointed in coordination with the Board of Assessors, with the town manager, has also passed. So those two special legislations has now solidified and formalized our finance department to be all appointed under one authority. So that's positive news. We would expect that we'll be making a permanent appointment in the next couple of weeks to the treasurer collector's position, and then move along down the lines, finally filling all the vacancies that were left behind with the elected treasurer collector's departure. Outside of that, and so communication, so that's something we always work on. I think Janice really pointed out the fact that, you know, she put in some flyers in for the Neighbor to Neighbor program in the town crier. She's working with Kelly to insert that in the census. So, you know, we're always thinking of different ways to communicate with the public, but I think the best mode of communication really is word of mouth. You know, we have lots of board and committee members that are actively engaged in town business, and so, you know, if they see someone or hear someone that's in need, or they're seeing something that's happening in town that needs attention, please point them in the right direction, and we're happy to fill those needs. So, but we'll do anything we can as far as communication. We know that this is always a struggle, no matter how much we do. So, pending any questions, that's my update to this priority listing.
Good. Thank you for walking us through that. I think it's good to sort of check in on this. Steve, Maureen, any thoughts?
When are they going to start the Warren Street redevelopment, Derek? Is that still pending on the sewer?
Yes. So as the last time I talked to Dennis, his plan is to sleeve that sewer main that comes down Warren Street. Once that is complete, we can then go ahead and then issue the bid to reconstruct the parking lot. As we pointed out in the past, we'll go up to, I think it's 14 parking spaces today, up to 21 parking spaces once it's complete. So that'll be a substantial expansion once that's complete. And then, you know, it'll certainly be up to the board to decide as to the disposition of Warren Street, if we're going to continue to maintain it as permanently closed. I can tell you, though, there's been a drastic difference in having that street closed just for parking. I was in a parking lot yesterday, and you know, it's truly a parking lot now. And I think the community has realized that it's no longer a cut through anymore. And so we haven't heard any negative feedback that folks want to have it reopened. So, but there's be more to come on that Warren Street redevelopment.
Okay.
Earlier in the presentation, you talked about Governor's Landing, and the tie and bond report pops up. And this actually triggers a memory going back to the special town meeting. There's a little bit of, you know, confusion from what I hear within dates. You know, we hear 2024 may be a total tip project for Route 140. I've heard William Street to Brook Street. I believe that's probably the most accurate of what I know or what I think is true. But then you also hear, I think the attorney, when he presented for Governor's Landing, spoke about, you know, perhaps a mill and overlay in 2022, I think he mentioned. Now, I don't know where he got that information from. At town meeting, somebody spoke and said they hadn't heard anything that this was on the docket at all with the state of Mass. So it'd be nice, I think, if we could reach out at the state level and try to get some clarification. You know, my gut feeling tells me with COVID that a lot of these projects may get pushed back, but it'd be nice to know. And the reason I say that is ties into the tie and bond report, where if we do have a section of the sewer that's bad, I believe it runs behind, or from what I've been told, it runs behind the Ristine building and in the woods, you know, kind of behind the country super and whatnot. I think we want to be mindful, and I think it has to start with our board. I feel like we need to kind of control a little bit more, be a little more proactive as opposed to reactive. But as we did with High Street, if that sewer needs to be improved and we need to get that sewer up past Brook Street, I think we need to start talking about that now and maybe even think about that being a warrant article. And the only thing I don't know is cost, and I don't know where it needs to begin, but I think that it's a good time to invest in getting it over the bridge past the municipal parking lot, which we know that's going to be, or we think that's going to be a necessity. And at that point, we also need to be ahead of where they're going to do the tip project. So if they're going to end the tip at Brook Street, I would think we'd want to extend the sewer past Brook Street. You know, at least come down first couple of 3 or 4 houses or whatever's on that section. So I think this would be a good time to talk about that. Maybe get Dennis's input. I don't know if you, Mr. Chairman, if you want to have that as a discussion item, you know, or maybe when he presents his budget, it may be a good time to bring it up. But I think we need to be ahead of that because you don't want to have a situation where we're notified last minute, there's a mill and overlay coming up and we don't have sufficient time to get that sewer extended. Now, I highly doubt that's the case, but again, I just want to make sure that we're far enough ahead of it, knowing that they don't allow you to open the road after they perform that type of work for a period of years. So I'm probably onto somebody else's idea, but that was one thing I wanted to talk about. Did you have a response? I'll yield. And there was something else I wanted to talk about.
No, just agreement that we got to make sure we're ahead of that, because we certainly don't want to be in a position of either having to wait because they've done the work and we are in that 5-year moratorium. But we also want to make sure that if it needs to get done, we get it done prior to that work starting. So, I mean, I think we did a good job of that with the tip projects that's going on now and doing all the work along there. And I think we just need to make sure that we do the same thing. I know Grafton had an issue, right? They just did all that paving a year or 2 ago, and then they just dug it all up to do some infrastructure work there along 140. So we certainly don't want to be in that position where we've got a nice paved 140 from Williams Street to Brook Street, and then all of a sudden we got to go in and dig it up for any reason.
Yeah, and I think that happened 25 years ago, and I think we learned from that mistake. I think it was torn up right. I remember the incident. It was torn up right along, probably in the vicinity of where the funeral home is, right in that area. Those water main breaks. So again, I don't know what section is the worst section, but I think that's something, especially on the sewer side, we've got to try to get ahead of. And you know, that's going to, from a financial aspect, that's really going to hurt. I think that's going to be a bitter pill to swallow for financially, but I think it's something that we have to cross. I think that's a bridge we have to cross.
So Derek, let's figure out a good time and a good sort of context within which to have that conversation with Dennis. So
sure, yeah, we can do that. But I just to Selectman Tanning's point, and I said at town meeting, the Mass DOT has already gone through 25% design, and the last time we spoke to them, they had every intention on conducting a public hearing this spring with the Upton community to present the 25% design. And I know that some folks didn't believe that, but that came directly from Mass DOT, and we had a bunch of town officials. Chief Bradley was in that meeting. Dennis Westgate was in that meeting. Chief DeFranz was in that meeting. So a number of town officials have heard that from Mass DOT.
Yeah, I think the only question really is, will it be a mill and overlay or a full tip? And it sounds like we'll know that answer in the next couple of months. So I feel pretty confident with that. And I think that, draws in nicely to Governor's Landing. It gets us a little bit closer, it cuts down that cost. I think I said it at the meeting, but I'll reiterate, the way that it was presented. I mean, I would not support that project the way it was presented. That we've got to be steadfast. We've got to make sure we get commercial investment for that project. There's got to be commercial on 140. That's my particular opinion on that. And I guess the only other thing I was going to talk about real quick was the neighbor to neighbor program. And, I think that my feeling, as a board member, I haven't done it recently, but every once in a while I'll go through some old notes and reread, say, the will. And I always feel like me as a selectman, I'm perhaps skirting my authority, or it's not really authority, it's responsibility, my responsibility to the Knowltons and Ristines. And I just always feel a little uneasy just delegating that type of work. So I myself personally, I'd probably like to take a little bit more personal action in the neighbor to neighbor program, maybe help make some decisions, maybe, sit in on those type of conversations, just again, so that I feel I'm upholding, the duty that, we accept as selectmen, which is administering those monies. I feel like we've designated it, which again, the intent is great. I don't have a problem with that. I just feel personally like I've skirted the work, so to say. And again, that's just my feeling. I don't know if that resonates with anyone else, but. And that's all. I was on a pretty good roll there. I'm out.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Do you want to go through your report? Any updates?
I just have a few updates. A couple of things I want to talk about, just because it was one thing specifically that has come up. We have received a couple inquiries, and I've mentioned this in the past, that we've kind of changed our approach to how we will, one strategy to accept our tax bills. So in the past, folks would just mail their tax payments directly to town hall, or they could drop it off in the Dropbox, or they could just go online. So there's an added feature this year that we're asking folks who want to mail in their taxes to send it to a Century Bank, which is out in Reading, Mass, that'll do all of our deposits for us. And so there's about 278 municipalities that are already implementing this. And it's something that we probably should have implemented a long time ago. But when folks see their tax bill and they see the mail address, it'll say Reading, Mass. And so and I mentioned this past, I figured that this was going to create some hesitation by some of our residents. But again, that's our new lockbox program. And the bank out in Reading, Mass, they're the Century Bank. They're the ones that are actually doing the deposits on our behalf. And part of the reason we're doing this is because when we're in a COVID environment too, most importantly, is that we combusted about 1,500 hours last year just doing deposits. And if we did the math on that, it's about $27,000 in manpower time just doing deposits. So there's been some residents who question why we're doing this, and it really comes back to just another program that we're trying to make the Treasurer Collector's Office a little bit more efficient. So again, I had said it back in early December that I brought it up then, and I said I would continue to talk about it, knowing that, again, this is a new way of doing business, and so folks would have hesitation. And there have been some folks who've called into town hall asking why they're being asked to send their checks to Reading. So again, if you hear anything, if folks have any concerns, please send them our way, and we'll try to explain the new process and let them know, why this is kind of a change. But, if folks feel just as comfortable going online and submitting a payment, or just dropping it in our Dropbox right outside of town hall, we will continue to offer those avenues as well. And then another program I wanted to talk about is and again, it's odd to say because many folks that tune into these meetings work in the private sector, and so I would say usually government is usually 10 to 20 years behind in many respects on how we do business. And so up until this month, the town of Upton, when they would track sick time and vacation time, all these earned accrued times, it was done in an Excel spreadsheet. And so, our commitment to taxpayers is that, again, we'd be more efficient with our time. And so Deb Tater, our Treasurer Collector, and Sandy, our HR Director, have been working together to implement an online tracking system that's going to automate how we track accrued time for our employees. So again, it seems like this is a no-brainer, but we combust a lot of hours on Monday morning when we do payroll, just going through each individual 70 employees, updating their accruals and sick time and vacation time and personal time. So again, this will automate things and should certainly cut down on the time necessary to keep our records straight. So again, that's going to be launched this month as well. So I get excited to report things like that. When we went from the Excel spreadsheet to building a budget to VEDA, that was a huge win, I thought. We saved countless hours of all of our department staff time by going through that system. So again, this is something that's really important to the folks that touch us every day. Chief Bradley reported that, as you all know, our police department is an accredited police department. And so speaking from an individual who led an accreditation process when I was in the city of Worcester, it's extremely time consuming. It's extremely important, but it's extremely time consuming. And kudos to Chief Bradley for leading the police department to accreditation years ago. But guess what? Every 3 years, you have to get reaccredited. And so his department is going through this reaccreditation process just at the same time where they've been able to get all their police officers off of field training. So he's got a full complement of police officers now, although some of them are young in some respects with the town and have not as much experience. He's now leading the department through a reaccreditation process. So just know he's going to be a very busy individual with his staff going through all their policies to meet those accreditation standards. The CARES Act, so as you all know, we received last spring $700,000 in CARES Act appropriation. That money was supposed to be expensed by December 31st. We did receive word that because this pandemic continues to persist, that money will be extended. We haven't received a final extension date, but we know we're able to spend that money. And I believe we have approximately $200,000 still remaining of that original appropriation. So hopefully we'll continue to put that money to good use and help accomplish some of the things that we need to do, especially what we're now seeing in the community, where we have 38 now active cases in the town of Upton. We were going back and forth from being a yellow to a red community, but we've been really standing firm as a red community the last 3 weeks with, again, 38 active cases. So that doesn't bode well for the number of COVID cases in town, but what does bode well as our first responders will be the first group to be vaccinated with the Moderna vaccine. There's going to be 2 clinics these are going to be regional clinics. Again, kudos to the Board of Health and Trish Parent and Diane Turner from the Board of Health staff. They were able to convince state officials that the town of Upton will hold a regional vaccination clinic. So we're going to host a regional vaccination clinic over at Nipmuc High School on January 12th, and then another one that following Saturday, which would be January 18th, I believe, or 15th, that following Saturday. And it's going to be just for fire, police, and dispatchers. And it's going to encompass 6 other communities in the Blackstone region. So again, this is just another example of the town of Upton taking the lead in the region, in this case for public health. So happy to report that. And then lastly, I just wanted to put in a plug in for the Recreation Commission. Believe it or not, but they've already started an open enrollment for Kids at Play. And so families and parents that are interested in signing their children up, they can go to www.uptonrec.com and start the enrollment process for this coming summer's Kids at Play. Pending any questions, I'll turn this back to the chair.
No questions. That's awesome update. A lot going on. It's good. Thank you, Derek. Questions, Stephen Maureen?
I have no questions.
No questions. Good job, Derek.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. That's for sure. COVID doesn't make it any easier.
No, it doesn't.
Good. All right. Anything else that folks have? Otherwise, we will take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Mattelli and I.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Thanks, everybody.